Fire without flame. Chapter 1. The Cinders of Winterdale. The first snow came early that year, before the trees had finished shedding their leaves, before the potatoes had all been pulled, before the war to the south had even found a winner. It fell in wet clumps that stuck to boots and roofs, and the iron cross atop the chapel of Winterdale, a village so far off the main roads that even the king's taxes came late. Wulfric didn't like the snow. He didn't hate it either. He simply respected what it meant. Winter was coming, and winter in the borderlands was never a guest. It was a siege. He was splitting wood behind the cartwright's barn when he heard the bell. Not the chapel bell, the warning bell. A rusted iron cowbell nailed to a post and only rung for wolves, raiders, or fire. It rang twice, then again, and again, urgent. Wild, Wulfric froze, axe half lifted. He heard shouting, and then the screaming began. He didn't think, he ran. Smoke was already curling above the rooftops when he reached the village square. 2 cottages were ablaze. A third had its door broken in, and blood painted across the threshold. There were horsemen, 3, maybe 4, cloaked in furs and scraps of rusted mail. Not soldiers, marauders. No flags, no heraldry, just knives and fire. They rode down anyone who ran. Wulfric ducked behind the butcher's shed, heart hammering, and watched as the blacksmith, a man twice his size, was cut down with a single blow across the neck. A woman screamed, a dog barked, and then went silent. He pressed his hand to his mouth, stifling breath. His axe was still in his hand. He could fight. He could die. Or he could vanish. He chose the third. He ran behind the chapel, past the grain mill, and into the woods beyond Winterdale's edge. Woods he knew better than any man alive. He was born in them, near blind as a child from sickness, and learned to trap before he ever learned to read. He crossed the frozen stream barefoot, leaving no tracks, climbed the ridge behind the charcoal kilns, hid in the hollow tree where he once spent 2 nights lost. When the sun set, the sky behind him glowed orange. The village was gone. He did not cry. He did not pray. He only sat with his back against the tree's cold bark and listened to the fire crackle across the hills like the laughter of wolves. He had no pack, no food, no cloak, only an axe and silence and a winter he now faced alone. Chapter 2. The Hollow Tree. Wulfric did not sleep that first night. He crouched beneath the thick roots of a fallen elm, layered with wet leaves and the ash-grey dust of frost. Wind whistled through the bare branches above, and each gust felt like a blade down the spine. He built no fire. Smoke could carry, and so could scent. He clutched the axe across his chest, blade resting against his shoulder, and listened to the dark. Somewhere far off, a woman cried once, then silence. He counted heartbeats until dawn. When the morning came, pale and silver, Wulfric moved. he walked northeast, away from the hills, through patches of black pine and foxborough scrub. His breath smoked in the air. He passed no roads, no game trails, no signs of life. Only once did he pause, at the edge of a clearing where a frozen stag lay dead. Ribs picked clean by crows. Its eyes had been plucked, hoof prints scattered around it. Human, not beast. He moved on. By midday he found the old hunting shelter. No more than a lean-to of bark and rotted hides, half collapsed against a boulder beside a stream now frozen to glass. He'd helped build it years ago, during a foraging trip with 2 boys from the village, both now likely burned. He knelt by the stream and broke the ice with his axe, drank, then set to work. He reinforced the lean-to with spruce branches, dug a narrow trench beneath for warmth, collected dry moss for bedding. It wasn't comfort, but it was shelter. Before dusk, he set a snare near the rabbit trail uphill, laid it clean, careful not to disturb the snow. Then he sat back, alone again. His hands shook from the cold. His stomach was hollow, but his eyes were calm. That night he dreamed of fire, not the raid, a hearth, a room with stone walls, wool rugs, and a kettle steaming above coals. Someone humming. Not a song he knew, just the shape of a voice. When he woke, he wasn't sure if the warmth had been memory or hope. But the snare was full, and he did not die that day. Chapter 3: Meat and Memory. The rabbit was small, barely more than a handful of bone and sinew. But Wulfric bled it clean, skinned it quick, and roasted it on a spit of green alder, with nothing but smoke and salt from a pouch he kept tucked in his boot. Salt was survival. He'd stolen it once, swiped from a sack meant for the baker's stew he'd never told. He chewed slowly, not for taste, for time. The longer it lasted, the longer he believed he'd earned it. He saved the bones. Later, he would boil them. The next 3 days passed in silence. He walked, snared, drank ice-warmed water in shallow mouthfuls. His boots cracked from frost, and he tied bark around the soles. He found a tree hollow where squirrels had left cones. He ate the nuts, raw. Once he found tracks. Human, 2 sets, lighter than his, moving southwest. He followed, not because he trusted, because he wanted to know if they'd left anything behind. The tracks led to a ruined hunting shack by the edge of a dead orchard. The snow here was muddied, the earth blackened near the fire pit. They'd burned meat. He smelled it. He found no one, but inside the shack, tucked under a hide blanket, was a girl, dead, young, maybe 15, fingers black with frostbite, eyes open, mouth still parted. Her cheek had been cut, crudely. The wound wasn't what killed her. Wulfric stood for a long time, then knelt and closed her eyes. He took nothing from her, only buried her in snow, then left. That night, he built a fire, not to cook, just to see. He watched the flames dance, like the chapel's candles, thought of the old woman who used to hum hymns in the rear pew when no one listened. He never caught her name. She'd baked honey bread once, and Wulfric, still a child then, had stolen 2 pieces, even though she'd offered him one. He remembered the way she'd smiled, like she knew, and gave him a 3rd. Chapter 4. The Cold Below. By the 8th night, snow began to fall in earnest. Fat flakes, steady and unbroken, blanketing the forest in soundless white. The lean-to collapsed under the weight. Wulfric didn't curse, just sat beneath the boulder, cloaked in branches, until the storm passed. When he woke, the world was gone. Everything smoothed to white. He could not tell east from west. The trees blurred into one another, and the cold had changed. It no longer bit, it sank into the joints, into the bones. He thought of digging, of crawling into the earth like a badger, sleeping until spring. Instead he moved. He walked for hours. He saw no birds, no tracks, only snow. Then he found the hole, a sunken patch in the snow, half collapsed, filled with brush. He cleared it with his axe and found stones below. A root cellar, old, abandoned. He pried open the hatch and climbed down. It smelled of rot and straw, but it was warmer than wind. Inside were wooden shelves lined with broken jars, old rags, and frost-cloaked roots that still held the shape of food. Turnips, spoiled, but not dead. He chewed one. It burned his tongue. But he chewed and lived. In that dark, he built a new fire, a small one. He scraped moss from the walls and burned it slow. And in that flickering half-light, he whispered aloud for the first time in days, still breathing. He wasn't sure if it was a prayer or a warning. Chapter 5. The Stranger's Footsteps. Wulfric stayed in the root cellar for 4 days. He slept against packed earth, wrapped in a ragged blanket he'd found stuffed behind a cracked jar of mouldy beans. He boiled turnips in a tin pail and drank melted snow mixed with pine needles. It wasn't comfort, but it was rhythm. And rhythm was survival. On the 5th day, he heard footsteps above. Soft, deliberate. Not the panicked stomp of beasts, but the careful tread of a man with reason to move quiet. Wulfric snuffed the fire, gripped his axe. He waited in the dark, breathing slow. The footsteps stopped near the hatch. Then 3 knocks. Soft. A voice followed, hoarse and male. Cold down there? Wulfric still said nothing. I saw smoke 2 nights ago, the voice continued. Didn't follow it. Not then. But I smelled boiled root. And I haven't eaten in 2 days. Silence. He looked at Wulfric, looked at the axe, then sat. Without a word, he unslung a pouch and spilled salt onto the dirt. Name's Bregan, he said. Wulfric said nothing. Bregan smiled. You look like someone who survived the kind of winter most don't. Wulfric finally spoke. Not finished yet. Chapter 6. The Pact of Hunger. They shared the root water and turnip stew. Bregan offered dried crowberry and bits of smoked squirrel jerky that tasted more of bark than meat. Wulfric didn't ask how he'd cooked it. Some things were better unasked. They didn't speak much, but when they did, it was only useful words. Game? None since the snow. Shelter? Collapsed. Heading where? Nowhere. Bregan nodded at that. Same. On the third night together, a scream echoed through the forest. Not a beast's cry, a human voice. Far off, but not far enough. Bregan's hand drifted to the hilt of a blade Wulfric hadn't seen before. Short, curved, stained. He didn't draw it. Wulfric didn't move. The scream came again. Survival was not about kindness. It was about rhythm, timing, caution, and sometimes cold company. Chapter 7. Bone and Fire. They moved west, where the trees grew thicker and the wind less cruel. Bregan said little, but Wulfric noticed how the man's eyes never stopped moving. He watched the trees, the shadows, even Wulfric's hands when he reached toward his belt. Trust was a luxury neither of them could afford. They found a carcass the second day out, a buck, freshly killed. Not by wolves, no tearing, just a single puncture in the neck. Poachers, Bregan muttered, or something worse. He knelt beside it, peeled the hide with the ease of a butcher. Wulfric gathered dry branches and cleared snow from a flat stone. They worked in silence. When the meat cooked, they ate with their backs to the trees, one eye on the dark. That night, Wulfric asked his first question. Why'd you come north? Bregan didn't answer at first. Then he said, South has too many kings. Too many ropes. Wulfric nodded. He understood. Wintredale was your home? Wulfric didn't speak, just stared at the fire. That's a yes, Bregan muttered. Didn't think many lived through it. Wulfric finally said, didn't live through it. Just kept walking. The days turned colder. They saw no birds, no deer, only a bear's scat near a cave they passed, still warm. They moved quickly on. Snow deepened. The sun stayed low, and in the distance, smoke. Not thin like a campfire, thick, black, too much for two men. They stopped at a ridge. Below, a longhouse, half dug into the earth, surrounded by wooden stakes and ringed by footprints. Not raiders, Bregan said. This is something else. Refugees? Wulfric asked. Or worse. Chapter 8. The Firehold. They circled wide, watched from the trees. Inside the longhouse fort were maybe 20 people, starved, dirty, but armed. Men with rusted blades, women with clubs, even children holding sharpened sticks. One girl stood watch on the stakes. She didn't look older than 10. They'll kill us or take what we've got, Bregan whispered. Maybe, Wulfric said. Maybe not. They're desperate. So are we. That night, they didn't sleep. They waited until the firehold grew quiet. Then Wulfric crept close, leaving Bregan behind. He approached slowly, empty hands, axe strapped to his back. The girl saw him, raised her weapon. He knelt, said nothing. A man appeared at the gate, thin, hair gone white. He held a rusted sword and a gaze sharper than steel. "You come to rob or die?" he asked. Wulfric answered, "Neither." The man spat. "There's nothing left. No food. Barely fire." "I've meat," Wulfric said, "and salt. We trade." The man stared at him, then nodded. "Then you're in. But one lie and we'll gut you like a boar." Fair terms, Wulfric thought. He nodded once. Behind him, Bregan sighed. "Mad bastard," he muttered, then stepped from the trees. Chapter 9. The Firehold Pact. Inside, the firehold stank of smoke, sweat, and dried blood. The walls were packed mud, reinforced with split timber, and the floor layered in bracken and old straw. Every corner had eyes, hungry ones. The man who'd spoken at the gate named himself Ral. Used to be a bailiff before the barons burned out. Now he led what was left of 2 neighboring hamlets. Families, survivors. Some barely more than ghosts. They listened as Wulfric and Bregan laid out their trade. 3 pounds of dried venison, half a pouch of salt, and a single strip of boiled bark mash. In return, they asked for shelter. 3 nights, no more. Some muttered, a boy spat, but Ral agreed. "You sleep near the door. You eat last." "Fine," Wulfric said. That night they sat near the fire. No one asked names. No one authored stories. But eyes lingered on Wulfric's axe. He did not sleep deeply. Chapter 10. Winter Teeth. The next morning, a girl was missing. Her name was Gilda. 12, pale hair, soft voice, gone. Tracks led west, bare feet in the snow. Too steady for wandering. Too clean. She was taken, someone muttered. The forest wants payment. "No forest takes children," Ral growled, but his face was pale. Wulfric stood. "Let me look." Ral hesitated, then nodded. Bregan followed. They walked for hours, tracking the faint prints along a stream bed. Crows followed above. At a fallen oak, the trail vanished. No scuffle, no blood, no drag marks. She walked, Wulfric muttered. Alone. Bregan knelt. "See this?" He brushed aside pine needles, revealing symbols etched into the frozen mud. Not runes. Words. No more fire. No more flame. The letters looked burned, but there'd been no flame. They turned back, silent. The girl was never found. That night, the fire burned lower. No one spoke. Chapter 11. The Hollow Feast. The hunger worsened. Supplies ran low. Bark was boiled. Leather was chewed. One of the men died from eating raw moss. Still, no one left. Wulfric sat near the gate, sharpening his axe slowly, as though each stroke kept the cold away. Ral approached, sat beside him. "You're quiet," the older man said. "So are you. I used to be a just man, kept accounts, heard disputes, balanced fines, thought that meant something. It did. Raoul shook his head. Now I count meat, wood, days. That still matters. Raoul laughed bitterly. You think surviving is meaning? I think survival is the beginning of meaning. Raoul fell silent, then asked, if you had to choose, eat or be eaten? Wulfric met his eyes. I've already made that choice. Later that night, the stew pot simmered again. Meat this time. But no one said where it came from. And Wulfric did not ask. Chapter 12. Smoke Without Fire. Snow began to fall in hard, wind-whipped sheets. The fire-hold walls groaned under the weight. One of the beams split with a sharp crack, and men scrambled to brace it with raw timbers. Signs. Inside, tension curled like frost beneath the skin. The stew pot simmered again that night. It was meat. Fatty, no bone. Wulfric did not eat. Neither did Bregan. They sat beside the door, packs slung tight, eyes tracking each mouthful others took. Later, when the youngest boy staggered out into the cold and retched, Wulfric followed the trail with his eyes. He counted the faces by the fire. One was missing. Where's Merrick? He asked Raoul. Raoul didn't answer. Bregan stood. We've overstayed. Wulfric didn't argue. They left before dawn. No goodbyes, no thank yous. Just silence and the crunch of boots on snow. Behind them, smoke rose, but no flame burned. Chapter 13. The Shape Beneath. 3 days alone again. The forest felt tighter, trees closer, the silence no longer empty, but waiting. Wulfric and Bregan travelled east toward the old road, what used to be a trade route, now lost to thicket and frost. They passed frozen carts, bones picked clean, wheels broken into jagged stars. Then the dreams returned. Wulfric saw the girl again, Gilda, pale-haired, barefoot in snow, standing beneath a tree with no leaves. She didn't speak. She only watched him. When he woke, Bregan was already sitting up, rubbing his neck. You see her too? Wulfric asked. Bregan didn't answer, didn't need to. Later that day, they found a cairn built of skulls, stacked with care, weathered with time, charcoal around the base, as if it had once burned. Bregan spat. This wasn't war. This was ritual. Wulfric stared at the bones. Some were child-sized. They moved on quickly. That night, neither man lit a fire. Chapter 14. The Teeth of the Earth. Storms returned. Not snow, ice. Rain that froze before it landed, sheathing every branch and stone in glass. The trees snapped like bones. The wind howled like wolves chasing nothing. They found shelter in a collapsed shrine. Stone walls caved in, altars split by roots. Wulfric dug a pit for warmth, covered it with pine boughs. Bregan slept curled in a cloak, blade clutched tight. In the dark, Wulfric felt the cold differently. It wasn't just around him. It was inside. Like the flame that once lived behind his ribs had gone out, and now he moved by habit, not heat. He reached toward the fire pit. No spark, not even coal. He lay back, staring into the ceilingless dark, and whispered, still breathing. But even that felt like a lie. Chapter 15. The Bone Choir. The storm lasted 2 more days. When the sun finally pierced the grey, it revealed a world lacquered in ice. Every branch bent, every rock slick. Wulfric moved with care. One slip could break a leg, and in the wild, a broken leg meant death. They followed the old road east until they heard it, singing, faint, off-key, like children humming from a cellar. They froze. The sound came from the forest floor. They crept toward it, silent, crouched, and found a pit lined in carved stone, half buried beneath root and snow, a forgotten barrow. And from inside, the song. Not words, just breath and sound. Bregan whispered, "We leave now." But Wulfric took a step forward, not out of courage, out of recognition. He'd heard that hum before, as a child, from the woman who'd baked honey bread and sang to herself when she thought no one listened. He stepped closer. The sound stopped. A gust of wind swept through the trees, and when it passed, the entrance was gone. Just snow, just roots. Bregan muttered a curse. They kept walking. Neither spoke again that day. Chapter 16. The dead come thirsting. By the next moon, they were starving. Game had vanished. No rabbits, no squirrels, not even the crows. They chewed bark, sucked on boiled leather. Bregan grew pale, lips cracked. Wulfric rationed his breath, his steps, even his thoughts. Then, on the 7th day of that march, they found smoke. Thin, not fire-hold smoke, too clean. They followed it cautiously, coming upon a stone hut built into a hillside, smoke trailing from a crooked chimney. Wulfric knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. He opened the door. Inside, an old woman sat by the hearth, humming. She did not look up. "Are you real?" Bregan asked. She smiled. "Are you?" They shared no names. She offered them broth, thin but warm, gave them dried greens and a crust of bread each. "You are not the first to come hungry," she said, eyes like ash, "but you may be the last." Wulfric asked, "Why help?" She looked past him. "Because once I didn't." They stayed one night. When they woke, the hearth was cold. The woman was gone, and the hut was dust. Just black stone, sunken and broken, and not a footprint in the snow. Chapter 17. Beneath no banner. They reached the river valley by dusk the next day. Wide, frozen. Once a road of trade, now a mirror for the sky. Across it, banners. Not royal, not raider. Simple cloth strung from pikes. On them, painted hands. Red, open-palmed, crude. Dozens of them. A warning. Bregan lowered his voice. This was borderland once. One of the clans. No more, Wulfric said. They crossed anyway. Midway through the valley, they saw the dead. Frozen into the ice. Hands outstretched. Mouths open, as if caught mid-breath. The wind howled across their backs, but they did not run. They had seen worse, and they would again. Chapter 18. The Hunger Road. Beyond the valley, the land sloped into broken foothills and tangled woods. Tall stones jutted from the earth like half-buried teeth, ruins from before even the barons built their halls. The path turned to mud and slush beneath their feet. Wulfric's boots had split at the heel. Bregan's cloak was held together by wire. They hadn't spoken in a day, not from anger, from exhaustion. Then they saw the boy. He was maybe 10, thin as a reed, wrapped in a burlap sack for warmth. He crouched beside a tree, skin blue at the edges, eyes unfocused. He didn't flinch when they approached, didn't even look up. Wulfric knelt, offered a bit of dried root. The boy reached, ate, slowly. "Where are your people?" Wulfric asked. The boy blinked. "Gone." "To fire?" "No," he said. "To each other." They made camp, gave the boy warmth. Let him sleep. By morning, he was dead. They buried him with pine boughs. No prayers, only the wind. Bregan said nothing. Wulfric only whispered, still breathing. He wasn't sure if it was for himself anymore. Chapter 19. Hollow March. The mountains loomed ahead, bare, slate grey, cold enough to break stone. Few travelled there, fewer returned, but they had no other path. Wulfric wrapped his hands in linen stripped from his shirt. Bregan used thorn-woven mitts soaked in tallow. They climbed. They passed a shepherd's skull frozen in a cairn, past a tree grown through a man's ribs, past silence, like a wall. Then they found the stairs, carved into the stone, old and crumbling, too precise to be wild, worn by time, not weather. Good. They slept in a wind-carved alcove that night, dreamt the same dream of fire, but without heat. Chapter 20. The Emberless Flame. At the summit the path ended. A plateau, stone-ringed, empty, except for a circle of stakes, long buried in frost. On each, a scrap of cloth, a strip of bone, a lock of hair. Offerings, or warnings. In the center stood a pillar, black stone, covered in writing so old it bled into the rock. Wulfric reached out, ran his fingers over the surface. It burned, not with heat, but memory. He saw the village, his mother's hands, the chapel bell, the axe, the screams. He stepped back, gasping. Bregan steadied him. What was it? A mirror, Wulfric said. Bregan said, of what? Wulfric looked east, then west, then down the way they'd come. Of what's left. They did not linger. There was no comfort at the summit, only truth and hunger. Chapter 21. The Hollow Below. The descent was harder. Ice slicked the rock. Wind cut the face like razors. Wulfric slipped twice, once catching himself, once caught by Bregan. Neither spoke of it. They reached the foothills in silence. Snow had changed. It no longer fell in flakes, but in great, drifting curtains, blinding and thick. Their world shrank to a few feet in any direction, but the woods below were moving. Not just wind, figures. Wulfric crouched behind a boulder. Bregan did the same. Ahead, 5 men marched single file through the snow, cloaked, hooded, carrying something between them, wrapped in linen, long and narrow. A body. No words passed, only breath and effort. They disappeared into the trees. Wulfric and Bregan did not follow, but they didn't turn back either. That night they made fire, not for warmth, for light, because the dark pressed too tightly that night, as though the earth itself breathed down their necks. Chapter 22. What was buried. They found the pit by scent, rot, old blood, charred meat. In the woods ahead, a clearing opened into a dug trench, deep, wide, rimmed with scorched wood. Inside, bones, hundreds, arranged in spirals, meticulously. Bregan stepped forward. "I've seen war," he said. "I've seen starvation, but this..." Wulfric said nothing. He stepped into the trench. Knee-deep in snow and ash, he picked up a rib. It had been etched. Not symbols, words. "I am not gone. I am sleeping." Wulfric dropped it. Bregan asked. And in the distance, saw a flicker of orange flame. A campfire. The first they'd seen in weeks. They moved toward it. Chapter 23. Fire without flame. The camp sat in a hollow surrounded by pine. 4 figures huddled around the blaze. 2 old, 1 younger, 1 hooded. They did not look up as Wulfric and Bregan approached. The fire burned, but gave no heat, no smoke. Wulfric knelt beside it, reached toward it. Nothing, just light. The hooded figure spoke, a woman. "You found the mirror stone," she said. Wulfric nodded. "It showed you." He nodded again. "Then you know why you're still breathing." He did not speak. She lifted her hood. Her face was scarred, weathered, but unmistakable. The woman who had offered honey bread. "You," he whispered. "You chose survival," she said. "Not safety, not comfort, not even hope." She stood. "That means you're ready." "Ready for what?" She gestured to the fire. "To carry it." Chapter 24. The Long Flame. Wulfric stared into the fire that burned without heat. No crackle, no wood, just light. It lit the faces of the 4 others seated in the hollow. Faces drawn, weathered, but watching him with neither threat nor welcome. Simply waiting. He stood slowly. "You want me to carry it," he said, voice low. "But what is it?" The honeybread woman, if she was even that, looked not at him, but through him. "It is the fire without flame," she said. "The warmth, not of hearth, but of memory. The light of those who refused to vanish." Bregan stepped beside him, hand resting near his blade. "You speak in riddles." "No," she replied. "We speak in truth." "And truth is rarely warm." Wulfric looked down at his hands, scarred, frostbitten, calloused from wood and steel and endless winter. He asked, "Why me?" The woman stepped forward. "Because you survived. You remembered. You did not give yourself to hunger. You did not forget the names of the dead. You buried the child. You closed the girl's eyes. You walked the white world and did not become it. The wind moaned through the pine. Period. Wulfric stepped to the fire. He reached in. It did not burn. It sank into his chest like a breath. He gasped, not in pain but in weight. The others vanished. Only Bregan remained. "You all right?" he asked. Wulfric stood straighter, eyes sharper. "Yes." "What happened?" I remembered. Bregan shook his head with a grunt. "You always speak like you're halfway in a chapel." Wulfric looked out across the woods. Snow still fell. The cold still howled, but he was no longer alone in it. There was something inside him now, something burning. They walked west, toward the unknown, toward whatever was left. Each step broke new snow. Each breath fogged the air. But Wulfric no longer whispered, still breathing. He no longer had to. The fire walked with him now, and it would not go out. The end.